Hello ladies and gentlemen, I am the OmniViewer, and seeing as how the month of January wasn't as productive as I had hoped it would be due to recurring illnesses, I've decided to step up my schedule a little in reviewing Godzilla the Planet Eater. I think enough time has passed by now that I can safely say I did not contribute to the initial numbers upon its release. I watched it the other night. Shock of all shocks, it was terrible. Let me get the positives out of the way first. Unlike City on the Edge of Battle, Planet Eater attempted to bring the story in a new direction and thus had a slightly more original plot than the previous film, which just attempted to rehash the first movie, Planet of the Monsters. That's it, by the way. Everything else is trash. And yes, I'm going into spoilers. I'm assuming you've already seen it if you wanted to, and if you haven't, well, I don't care. So let's start with the least important thing about this kaiju movie. The kaiju themselves. Godzilla's portrayal is exactly the same as it's been in the last two movies. He spends the majority of the runtime sleeping, again, and he doesn't move when he's actually awake, again. Well, alright, he moves a little bit more than usual when engaged in a close encounter with that other creature I'll be getting to in a moment, but otherwise he's still the barely mobile blob he was in the last two films. As for this thing, it's not Ghidorah. I will give it credit for being an original premise and would have made for a good original monster, but it is not Ghidorah. Literally, the only thing that justifies this creature being Ghidorah is that it has 3 heads. But really, those other 2 heads feel kind of like an afterthought. Remember, when he first shows up to destroy the Aratrum, it's just the one impossibly long serpentine neck that comes out of that singularity. If that's all it had remained as, there would have been no reason to call this thing Ghidorah. It honestly feels like somebody came up with this design, then they remembered, oh, we have to make this Ghidorah somehow, we'll just throw 2 more in alongside of it. That's how it feels. But hey, unlike the other 2 movies, this one actually has a kaiju fight. If you can call it a fight, really. I certainly don't. A fight implies back and forth, actual combat. This? Well, you see this image right here? I was right. This is pretty much what most of their encounter consists of. It's not really a fight. I don't even know what you would call it. Of course, the thing that makes it even worse is the running commentary that gets so ridiculously repetitive that it's almost laughable. Here, allow me to summarize it for you. Look at that thing that's happening. That thing that's happening doesn't make any sense. I know it doesn't make any sense, but it's happening. I know it's happening, but that doesn't mean it makes any sense. You're right, it doesn't make sense, but now something else is happening. Well, that other thing that's happening doesn't make any sense. You're right, it doesn't make sense, but look, it's clearly happening. Lather, rinse, and repeat ad nauseum. Oh sure, they try to spice it up by sprinkling technobabble liberally throughout it, but that doesn't really keep it from being cyclical in nature. It's all padding. That dialogue exists over the fight solely for the purpose of making sure the movie is feature-length. But then again, these movies were never actually about the monsters, right? I mean, they are only named after Godzilla. Why should we actually focus on them? The real focus is on the human characters. And by that I mean Haruo and Metphius, because everyone else is basically just there to give them somebody to talk to other than each other. Metphius, to the surprise of absolutely no one, turns out to be the evil manipulative villain we all knew he was from the very beginning. Nothing really changes about his character, mind you, he's pretty much the same. The only difference is that now he's spouting out Gen Urobuchi's nihilistic outlook. I can't really say there's anything else to talk about when it comes to Metphius. I mean, we all knew he was evil, we all knew he was manipulating everyone. The only thing that's different in this movie is that now we get to see what his end game was. And his endgame was to summon the ultimate evil so as to destroy the world. I wish I could say it was more interesting than that, but it's not. But the real focus is on Haruo. Now recently, someone tried telling me that Haruo was meant to be a deconstruction of angry, passionate anime protagonists. Having watched this abysmal trilogy through to the end, I do not believe it for even a second. I know what deconstructive characters look like, and Haruo is not one of them. First of all, as far as characterization goes, he's about as deep as a condensation ring left on a table. He's just angry, completely, from beginning to end, and any time you think he's showing a different emotion, it still somehow is fueled by his anger. Now, in order for that to somehow be deconstructive, The movie would have to actually be saying something specific about why this is not a good thing. Yet it is Haruo's anger that winds up saving the day. How, you may ask? Because for just a brief moment, he decides to stop being angry at Godzilla and instead be angry at Mephius and Ghidorah. He's still angry, mind you, he's just not angry at the same thing, at least not at the moment. Considering he winds up saving the day and being one of the people who restarts the human race, I don't exactly see how anything he's done up to this point was really a bad thing. But the real kicker comes at the end when it is revealed that he hasn't actually learned a darn thing. After Ghidorah is defeated in the dumbest way I can possibly think of, a way which incidentally does make use of that whole Chekhov's gun thing I mentioned, although not exactly in the way I had initially predicted, we get a little montage in which he and the remainders of humanity start to intermingle with the Hotua. And for some reason this is done entirely with still images that switch art styles to something that looks even uglier than the actual animated style. But when Haruo learns that the last Vulture mech can potentially be reactivated, that suddenly reminds him that he hates Godzilla. So, he takes Yuko's unconscious body that's still infused with nanometal, takes the Vulture, and flies at Godzilla in a kamikaze run to ensure that he's blown to bits. So all of this time, all of this stuff he's gone through, and he hasn't changed, even a little. And when he realizes he hasn't changed, his solution is not to try and put his past behind him and learn not to be such a hateful, angry person. I mean, he could do that, but that sounds hard. No, it's far better to commit suicide, right? I mean, obviously that's the only right solution for him, right? Go ahead, Haruo. That makes perfect sense. Go out in a blaze of glory because you can't get over yourself. It's not like you're leaving behind your pregnant wife or anything. What a great message to send to those children Toho wanted this movie to be marketed towards. And then, of course, the Hotua make him a god because of it. Deconstruction. It's a big word that I learned in my college literature course. That means I can apply it to anything I want. What about the other characters? What indeed? Yuko shows up briefly in a dream sequence to remind us all that she is the girl. Not any particular kind of girl, mind you, just the girl. The new Mothra twins, Miana and Mina, are basically still interchangeable. For some reason, they both want to get freaky. Oh, sorry, I mean connect life with Haruo. But only Mina gets that privilege because she knows how to get his spacesuit off of him. Yeah, I don't buy for a second that these two would be an item. They have less chemistry than baking soda and vinegar. That one doctor character is there for no reason. All the other people who were in spacesuits that you couldn't tell apart in the first two movies are suddenly given faces just in time to be killed off by Mephius' Lovecraft cult. Everyone on board the Aratrum dies, and I don't care. You know what? Forget it. This movie clearly isn't going to be saved by its characters. The one thing it has left is the one thing I've seen so many people trying to push as the saving grace of the film, and that would be its themes, its ideas, the stuff it's trying to say. If only it knew how to say it. First of all, let me talk about how the messages are actually delivered. Poorly. There's a scene in Planet Eater. The doctor character walks into the room where Haruo is being angry while staring at Yuko's unconscious body. He has a reason to be there, but first he fills Haruo in on how Mephius is starting some kind of new religion. He then starts going off on a little diatribe about how religion is all just propaganda made up by people to gain power in times of crisis. It's all phrased in very vague, generalized terms, and the doctor isn't even really looking at Haruo while he's speaking. Once he's finished, Haruo says, "Well, did you need me for something?" And then suddenly the doctor remembers that the story has to continue. That's terrible delivery. What happened is that the doctor stopped being a character and for a brief moment was reduced to a mouthpiece for Ganno Ibuchi to voice his opinions on religion. It interrupted the story, and when he was done, the story was allowed to continue. The problem is that the doctor's soliloquizing exists in spite of his character rather than because of it. That's a problem that existed in City on the Edge of Battle too. Only it took up the entire finale that time. But never mind how this stuff is being said. What really matters is what is being said, and the movie can't function in that regard either. First of all, as previously alluded to, all of the themes about religion is very vague, general, and honestly not very original. So religion is just a farce to dupe gullible people into giving certain individuals all the power in a time of crisis? You don't say. I've certainly never heard that 1,000 times before. So do you have anything different to bring to the discussion? No? Didn't think so. But here's another question. If the movie is supposed to be a complete indictment of religion and how dangerous it can be, why is Mothra there? Remember, Metphius is winning because he's brainwashing Haruo into giving in to his cult's demands, and then suddenly Mothra breaks in by way of telepathic silhouette, and that's what starts Haruo on the path to resisting. And in case you've forgotten, Mothra is worshipped by the Hotua as a god, with temples and everything. That means it is a religion. So that's clearly an example of a good religion in a movie about how all religion is bad. So what the heck is Planet Eater even trying to say? How set in your ways do you have to be to speak in absolutes about a subject when an exception to the thing you're talking about is standing right next to you? Well, maybe this movie wasn't really an indictment of all religion. Maybe it's supposed to be about telling the difference between a religion and a cult. Except no counter-argument is ever made to anything Metphius says, except for Haruo just saying it's nonsense, which really isn't much of a counter-argument at all. So the takeaway is, religion is bad except when it's not. Great to know. Oh, but we're not even close to done. Consider when Metphius explains the origins of the monsters. Yet again, it's all tied back to the nuclear bomb dropped on Hiroshima in 1945. That was the tipping point. That was the moment all the monsters started appearing in 1999 and on through the 21st century, with Godzilla being the last of the bunch. So the nuclear bomb was the reason all the monsters appeared half a century later? I'm sorry people, but those two events are so far removed from each other that there is no possible way you could draw any sort of causality from one to the other. But not to fear, Planet Eater has its bases covered. You see, it wasn't just the nuclear bomb, it was all technology, all of human civilization, in fact. That's right, it is civilization itself and all of the technology produced therein that creates these monsters and leads to entropy. Okay, so that doesn't really make complete sense, but it is true that wars come about because civilizations butt heads and develop technologies to try killing each other. So that's what the human characters conclude at the end. They do away with all civilization and all technology to go and join the Hotua civilization with their technology. Wait, what? Hate to break this to you folks, except I really don't, but just because the Hotua are primitive doesn't mean they are not examples of civilized people with technology. They clearly have an organized culture in which they live. That's the base definition of civilization. And they are clearly using technology, or do you think the bows and arrows they used to hunt were picked off of trees? And obviously, this completely flat, smooth cave wall with writing and figures etched into it was achieved through natural erosion. So civilization and technology are bad except when they're good. I repeat, you can't speak in absolutes when there's an exception that's staring you right in the face. This movie is so two-faced it could move to Gotham City and start a supervillain career. So there you have it. Now I can definitively say, without any sort of speculation, that the Godzilla anime trilogy really and truly is a total failure from start to finish. I've heard some people say that the trilogy was just meant to be filler, a way to keep Godzilla in the public eye during the wide gap between American movies. You know what? That's not an excuse. Like I keep saying, quality over quantity. I would much rather have just patiently waited this long space of time for what looks to be a good Godzilla movie than have to suffer through 3 terrible Godzilla movies in the interim. This whole experience has been so terrible that I am now filled with the overwhelming desire to go watch Godzilla's Revenge just so I can remember what a good kaiju movie is supposed to look like. But hey, at least it's over now. The Godzilla anime trilogy is finally done and soon to be overshadowed. Now we can finally leave it to just rot in the dust, and the people who made it, in spite of the fans, can go connect life with themselves. Until such time as we meet again, this is the OmniViewer signing off. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to like it as well as subscribe to the channel for more content of a similar nature. Also, check the description for links to our Twitter, DeviantArt, and Patreon pages, as well as the Amazon link for the novel Operation Red Dragon: The Daikaiju Wars Part 1, penned by yours truly. Thank you all, and we appreciate your support.